Let us now look at why medicine has ended up with such a reductionist attitude. If we can understand the roots of reductionism, we will be able to find a way out and bring it out of the clutches of the present reductionism into a state of whole person healing, an integrative approach that Dr. Rustum Roy had always been talking about. Dr. Rustum Roy, as we have seen, was a multifaceted personality. In fact, when he gave a testimony to the US House of Representatives Committee on Science Technology, he was giving a standing ovation, something that had not happened in 16 years. He had to his credit more than 600 scientific papers on various fields. So let us explore this a little deeper. All of you must be familiar with this famous name, René Descartes, who was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist, and he has left a deep impact on scientific thinking. There are many good biographies available, and there are great discoveries. Coordinate geometry, for example, was melding or merging geometry with algebra, something that we take for granted and without which we would not be able to do anything. We would not be able to navigate aeroplanes and we would not be able to construct skyscrapers. What he had to say was, God created the world as a perfect clockwork mechanism. You understand the parts and you understand the whole. So the whole emphasis of this great mathematician and scientist still holds sway. And that is, everything works in perfect clockwork, and all you need to do is to understand the parts. And you will be able to understand how the whole thing works. Another great influence on modern science has been Sir Isaac Newton. He had a deep study of alchemy, theology, and astrology. Yes, you heard it right. Not just astronomy, but astrology as well. In the more than 1752 books that he had in his personal collection, at least 2% were on astrology. And mind you, for all the contributions that he made to physics, physics occupied only 3% of his collection, whereas theology had 27% collection. As a matter of fact, Edmund Halley or Halley, after whom the Halley's Comet has been named, he once spoke something disparaging about astrology, and Newton said, "Sir Halley, I have studied the matter. You have not." Let us see what Isaac Newton had to say. He tied simplicity with truth. Truth is ever to be found in the simplicity and not in the multiplicity and confusion of things. For that matter, even Leonardo da Vinci has been quoted as saying that simplification is the ultimate sophistication. So these thoughts are ingrained into our scientific thinking. However nice and good they do put huge restrictions on the way things work in the field of living creatures. These ideas are best for physics, maybe for chemistry, but they are not good enough for biology or life sciences in general. Ernest Rutherford was another great scientist, and he won the Nobel Prize in 1909. He is considered to be the father of nuclear physics. He was born in New Zealand, and he was often described as being the greatest experimentalist since Michael Faraday. We fail to forget that Michael Faraday, one of the greatest scientists of his times, who came from very humble background, he started his career as an apprentice as a bookbinder, and he went on to become the fellow of the Royal Society and make great contributions in many fields, including electromagnetics and electricity and so many other things, including construction of lighthouses. As an advisor to the government, he had developed the ideomotor to demonstrate paranormal forces. Paranormal forces are those which cannot be described by physics, but they can be demonstrated by psychics. Coming back to Ernest Rutherford, who is the father of the alpha and beta particles, and it was in his laboratory that Chadwick discovered the neutron. He said, all science is either physics or stamp collection. In other words, the supremacy of physics is also ingrained into our minds. And if we are to be scientists and not just stamp collectors, we must be able to express our ideas in the language of physics. That has been a major drawback in the progress of medical science, because we are just trying to fit the bill, fit a description which this great man had uttered once. One thing we have to note and observe is that when molecular biology started in the 1950s, most people who were attracted to this were from the field of physics, because physics was at the forefront with its beautiful molecular models. Some of them had a background in chemistry. There were very few who came from the field of medicine, none at all for that matter. And there was a very small minority of people with a background in biology. And they adopted this reductionist view, the views that had become part of science from the times of René Descartes, Newton, Rutherford, and so many others like him. So the whole idea was that you break things into individual components. You can describe the whole world like that. And all the explanations that derive from physics and chemistry are good enough to describe any scientific phenomenon. This is best reflected in these words of Sir Francis Crick, the man who discovered the structure of the DNA as being that of a double helix. He said that the ultimate aim of modern biology is to explain all biology in terms of physics and chemistry. So now you will not be left with any doubt that the way medical science or life sciences biology in general is researched, if you have to gain recognition, you have to express everything in terms of physics and chemistry. But as we said earlier, the real cure lies only by integrating the humanistic approach, by understanding the social environment, by understanding the psychology of the person and blending that with biology. What you see here is the epitome of a reductionist philosophy. Here is a duck which has been described in the form of a machine. Every part has a function and it has an output. It has an input, it has an output, and it has a function that can be described just like you would describe clockwork or a machine. Today we need to understand complexity. We still do not understand what is going on inside an anthill or a beehive. Why do beehives behave the way they do? And that affects our entire environment. It also reflects the state of our ecology. And this is where studies of complexity science or chaos mathematics comes into picture. If that is lacking, medicine will just remain a stamp collection. We have not been able to find a cure for cancer. And why is that? Because the whole approach has been reductionist. The same thing applies to the brain and the nervous system. It is not the number of connections that the brain has. It is what are the neural networks. And networking is all about communication, all about preferences. Unless we understand complexity and move away from linearity, we will not be able to help mankind and alleviate the suffering that happens through sickness and disease. Same thing applies to ecosystems. It is a complex web. And that idea also extends to human societies. Human societies can only be understood if we can understand anthills and beehives, if we can understand the brain and the nervous system. And yet another complexity problem is understanding weather. In fact, complexity science was given mathematical rigor by Lorentz, who was himself a great mathematician and a meteorologist, as we shall see shortly. All of us have heard of the famous butterfly effect. We may not understand the mathematics behind it, or in fact, we may be having a very vague or even a wrong idea about the whole thing. In essence, what it says is that if a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon basin, it can stir up a typhoon or a storm somewhere in America or on the North Pole. And that is because of the various interconnections and networks of events and of dependencies that does this particular effect. But very frankly, these are not new ideas. There was a German philosopher, Johann Gottlieb Fichte, back in 1800s, who reflected the same ideas. Henry Poincare, the great mathematician, had also similar views. And Edward Lorenz, that we saw a few in the previous slide, actually gave it a mathematical formalism to this particular effect. As a matter of fact, it has been recognized by poets, and Benjamin Franklin, the President of America, who was also a great scientist and a very literary person, has expressed it in this particular poem. I'll just read this poetry for you. For the want of a nail the shoe was lost. For the want of a shoe the horse was lost. For the want of a horse the rider was lost. For the want of the rider the battle was lost. And for the want of a battle the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horse, shoe, nail. So we have these ideas with us. Why do we fail to apply them to medical science or life sciences? There is so much interdependency in nature that every life depends on the other. So let's not reduce that to just a few molecules and their interactions. They are important to understand as much as a screwdriver is necessary to turn the screw, but that doesn't make an aeroplane. As a matter of fact, there has been a shift from the Darwinian view to the views expressed by Lewontin. Now, Lewontin is a person with many ideas and specialties. He's a biologist and a mathematician. He is a geneticist as well as a social commentator and a student of evolutionary biology. His views are a natural evolution of the Darwinian theory of survival. What he says is that organisms neither evolve in isolation nor simply adapt to external factors. Further, organisms modify their environment according to their own needs. We often tend to forget this fact when it comes to ecology. There are a lot of people who are crying hoarse about the damage being done by human beings. But you remember, every organism modifies the environment according to its own needs. We did not have carbon burning fuels. We did not have pollution when the dinosaurs went extinct. Dinosaurs were organisms and they were modifying the environment. And therefore, they had to complete their role in their existence and move on. That's the way nature works. Another tenet expressed by Lewontin is that organism and environment therefore undergo a continuous process of mutual interaction. The hunter-gatherer turned into an agriculturist. That agriculturist is now becoming a person who is making genetically modified crops. This is all an organism and environment moving together synergistically. There is a codependency and a co-adaptation. If we don't take into account these factors, we shall just remain with the reductionist view of life sciences, which is proving to be inadequate because of the suffering that mankind is going through. So the whole idea is that we should understand complexity and wholeness. All of us are aware that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. As far as life sciences are concerned, we have to move away from the mold which was cast by René Descartes, who said that if you understand the parts, you understand the whole. That is proving to be inadequate, and we have to adapt to the new wisdom that has dawned upon other parts of science. Also, the whole cannot be reduced to or deduced from its parts. The parts are no guide to the whole. This brings us to whole person healing. Not healing the parts, not trying to restore a homeostasis on the basis of a particular parameter, which is a statistical mean or median or mode of the whole population, not taking into account race, not taking into account age, and not taking into account so many other dynamic factors. Whole person healing actually begins by saying that we must go to the level of the spirit first. Now, what exactly is the spirit? The scientist dealing with life sciences will have to deal with that. And presently, there are many ways of doing that. And this whole series of videos will run you through that. After the spirit, mind comes next. Mind is the key and the most powerful thing that will help a person to heal. And the body comes last. In summary, this is whole person healing. Spirit first, mind next, body last. In this series of videos, we shall be looking at examples of energy medicine tools, which have proved to be very successful and which have been used very effectively by many practitioners. I'll be dealing with malariotherapy, which is a wonderful example and easy to understand because it deals at the body level first, something we are already accustomed to. Then we shall be looking at a very bizarre concept, healing by intent. There'll be yet another miraculous methodology called rapid wound healing, which has been demonstrated in laboratory conditions. Also, we look at what is emitted prana or chi. You will love all these applications. And finally, my favorite, homeopathy. But in homeopathy, I'll be dealing with some offshoots of practice which incorporate all these factors mentioned earlier. With that, I conclude this particular presentation. And in the next one, we shall take up malariotherapy because we can learn a lot and incorporate it even today. Thank you very much for your attention and see you in the next video. Until then, bye bye.